Winota can be against 4-color Reclamation.
And there we have Elenbogen on the left with that Mardu Winota deck. That nice 2-3-4 curve of Reaver into Woestrider into Lieutenant with good mana as well. Gotta love the opening hand in Elenbogen's seat.
Yeah, the mana base in this Mardu Winota deck is unreliable, shall we say. It feels like it's kind of patched together with tape and Elmer glue at times. But this is the exact kind of curve you want, where you have the Triumph on 1, and then you get to curve into 2-drop, into 3-drop, into 4-drop, applying pressure, and at no point exposing yourself to, for example, the Dovin's Veto that we see in Ichikawa's hand.
And that was what Ichikawa was tanking on in this hand so hard, is having Growth Spirals, having Uro sounds great at first, but there's nothing else of substance here.
Yeah, that Dovin's Veto is effectively a mulligan, and Ichikawa doesn't have the quick Reclamation to curve into, doesn't have a way to interact with Elenbogen's board, so he's just relying on that fast burst of mana being enough to find him something in that time frame.
And this copy of Tajik that Elenbogen has found off the top is going to pair beautifully with this Lassatep Reaver.
Absolutely, and Amass and Tajik both go very well with Battery's Lieutenant.
Ooh, that's just so much resiliency to removal in general. Tajik making it to where you have to prioritize putting something on Tajik first, but then also you're just going to see Elenbogen have the bodies immediately replaced.
Elenbogen very helpfully mousing over Tajik just so we get a look at all of his many, many lines of text there.
I feel slightly disrespected. We are professionals.
I'm going to choose to believe it's for the viewers at home and not for us, but maybe I can feel insulted regardless. I can find a way to take some offense.
Well, it looks like Ichikawa's just doing a bit of wheel spinning, so how about you take us through what Tajik actually says?
So we have Haste, so the base case is just a 3-2 attacker, a fine card in an aggro deck. We also have Mental, which allows you to put a +1/+1 counter on an attacker with less power, so either one of those zombies there. And then also, you can pay 2 mana to give it first strike, and then the fourth and final ability is you get protection from non-creature sources of damage. So a card like Deafening Clarion or Solar Blaze is very ineffective in the face of a Tajik.
Exactly. The only thing that those can actually impact is the Tajik itself, but the fact that it has haste, it's already going to get to rumble in here. Look at this. Elenbogen on the third turn is attacking for what? 6, 7 across 3 bodies?
Yeah, and this isn't the same kind of aggressive deck that he won a Pro Tour with, where you're just dumping 1-drops on the table as fast as possible. This deck has a higher curve, but those cards are pound for pound more effective, which means you can skip your first turn and still be applying a lot of pressure by turn 3.
Right, this deck pays a premium for resiliency, and I think in that area, it is just incredible.
Another Uro being cycled for Yuki Ichikawa, making a lot of land drops. I guess a pass with a Shard Typhoon open here. Or maybe... Hold on a second, no. Add one to the Uro count, whoever's keeping the tally. Uro has entered the battlefield, and right now, that one is dominating the board. I'm hearing word from our director that it is 7, so I'm going to take that on good faith here. And this is the turn where Ichikawa is crossing his fingers and praying that Elenbogen does not have a Renota, and he's right. He's going to emerge from this turn unscathed.
Right, this is a spot that really is just putting Elenbogen to the test where things can start to get bad if Elenbogen doesn't have a way to just keep applying pressure.
And he's sending in his creatures regardless here, and whatever the Uro decides to pick off, Elenbogen will get a 2/2 Knight thanks to that Basilisk Lieutenant.
And I do like this attack from Elenbogen. I think Andrew realizes that the door is going to close fast if you give Ichikawa time to gain life, develop more, draw extra cards off this Uro. So you just need to throw whatever resources you can into putting Ichikawa in as close a range as possible to being punked out of a game that might otherwise be out of reach.
And with Woestrider and Basilisk Lieutenant, there's a chance that if Ichikawa is just hoping to stabilize behind this Uro, Elenbogen can dig towards the Renota to stand the door shut.
Alright, Teferi Time Raveler.
And Teferi Time Raveler gets to bounce the token back to the hand, removing it for good, and not even allowing Elenbogen to get the token back from Basilisk Lieutenant.
Yeah, this is a spot where maybe Elenbogen could have played around it by putting a counter on the token, but whenever you're trying to go wide, you want to distribute your power and toughness as evenly as possible.
And it sounds like Corey Baumeister has already started to rally back by beating Maru Winoda himself in this tournament. He's up to 1-1 now.
How do you even win games that fast with Teamer?
Yeah, Corey's trying to speedrun this tournament. I don't know if he has somewhere to be or what, but he's rattling through it here.
All right, and there's that protection from multicolor on Basri's Lieutenant coming in. Stonecoil Serpent, not the only creature in the format with that line of very relevant text.
Yeah, I've seen some awkward situations come up with Basri Lieutenant and Tajik, where like you can't mentor onto your own lieutenant or lieutenant if you're of a certain persuasion.
Nope, absolutely not.
Always trying to keep the British down here on the SCG Tour online stream.
This is getting into some territory that maybe we just shouldn't, you know? I know the kind of person I am.
Hamilton is being played 20 feet away from me, so lots of attacks on all sides on the British national character going on around me here. And we do see Shark Typhoon cycled from Yuki Ichikawa, so we do get a blocker that can jump in front of the Bounty Lieutenant here, removing that endless source of further 2/2s, that blocker for the Uro, dealing with the biggest threat on this board.
Yeah, and Ichikawa, not really that concerned with this Teferi going away. Elenbogen obviously wants to be able to check it when it's free to do so, but for the most part, it's just not a card that when it only has one loyalty left, that you're expecting the game to go long enough for that to get that much more value.
And raise the alarm there for Elenbogen. One of the few targets for Dervin's Veto in this matchup. Andrew finds a window to stick that one in there before the Veto can find a use for itself.
Aether Gust off the top is just not something that Ichikawa wanted to find there.
No, although it is maybe a delaying tactic for a potential Winoda down the line.
And, you know, there is also a point where Elenbogen is low enough on lands that this Mystical Dispute can just counter a Winoda the hard way.
Yeah, we see that a lot against these Rakdos Sacrifice decks, Jund Sacrifice, Mado Winoda, where their big finishes are expensive enough that you don't want Dispute in your deck, but you can usually find a good use for it in game one here.
Yeah, Cancel is not blank cardboard.
Dervin's Veto is blank cardboard, and Aether Gust is bordering on blank cardboard, so we have a whole lot of nothing for Ichikawa, but that Mystical Dispute somehow is the best of the bunch here.
Ooh, Venerated Loxodon. Love a Verdurous Gearhulk, but Elenbogen says, no, I need to find a Winoda to keep up with this Uro.
Yeah, he needs to aim higher here.
How many bodies can you sacrifice before the Winoda's not even worth it?
It's a tough balancing act. Luckily, you do get to scry one by one, so if you find the Winoda quickly, then you can stop the presses, but yeah, if this next scry misses, then Elenbogen is put to a tough decision.
And it feels like the game's just reaching this point where anything more than that, you're just not going to even have the battlefield to set up this sort of big power play of a turn.
Yeah, and he does sacrifice the other token from Emergency Alarm, scrying a Selfless Savior to the bottom. And now we're just cycling this Triome, finding yet another land, and Elenbogen's going to pack it in, send this one to a game 2.
Yeah, this is with that Shark token coming in the air. Elenbogen knows that one draw step is not going to be good enough.
And some new choices here in sideboarding to analyze now. So for Elenbogen, we see cards like Legion Warboss, Kaiser Freebooter, D-Spark, which can interact with your Wilderness Reclamation, as well as something like 9-pack Ambusher, if that were to be in the deck. What are you looking at from Elenbogen's side?
I think the big things are just making sure that you're diversifying your threats a little bit in such a way that you aren't getting colded by the fairly conditional reactive spells that Ichikawa has available. We see Legion Warboss, for example, being a card that Andrew reaches to very quickly because it's something that's just sort of an army in a can that can really punish after something like a Deafening Clarion resolves. It's also great in the face of a Teferi Time Raveler. Obviously not the best against Bone Crusher Giant, but when you expect your opponent to be better at containing your early aggression, having things that are more than one resource for a single piece of cardboard is exactly what Elenbogen wants to reach for.
We saw Michael Jacob have a lot of success by trying to zig while his opponents were zagging. They would bring in their Ether Gust. He would board out most of his red cards, not even bother with Legion Warboss, and effectively become this Orzhov aggro deck splashing Winota. With open deck lists, Elenbogen sees Ichikawa only has one Ether Gust in his entire 75, but he does have Bonecrusher Giant, which is kind of accidentally effective against the same class of cards.
Yeah, and against this Marty Winota deck in particular, having something that Elenbogen can't really zag that hard against is just an incredibly welcome tool for Ichikawa.
So Bonecrusher Giant, I imagine going to do some good work, and definitely Clarion, again, a card which less effective than you might expect it to be in the dark against an aggressive deck, maybe still worth it. I think maybe you still need it to clear up some of that early aggression, but Devout Decree also we see a nice sideboard card there, picking off any of the early threats in this effectively Orzhov aggressive deck, and maybe if you live long enough, you live through the turn, you get to tag a Winota with it too.
Even hitting something like a Tajik would feel great.
Yeah, you take down a Judith, they don't get a trigger on the way out.
Yeah, just hitting that Tajik in particular is something where it can pave the way for a card like Deafening Clarion to just mop the entire battlefield up.
Elenbogen takes a mulligan, goes down to 6, and this is where you see some of the awkward mana situations here in this Marty Winota deck, where he would love to be able to curve Selfless Savior into a 2-drop, into a 3-drop, but he currently does not have an untapped Black Source for turn 2, so yeah, we see him think about putting that Selfless Savior back, realizing that he wants to play that Triumph on 1, and then that doesn't really give him a good window to stick that Selfless Savior.
Yeah, it's so brutal, because ideally you just want that card protecting your freebooter into your Judith, but that just isn't doable here.
And Kaisel Freebooter as a 2-drop, a great pickup for this Mardu deck. The unfortunate thing is that it doesn't hit any of the 4 copies of Bonecrusher Giant that we see for Ichikawa, which can then kill the freebooter and get back whatever card it was hoping to take out of commission.
And here, most of what Elenbogen's looking for are cards like Deafening Clarion.
Yeah, but he's going to see a hand with just Wilderness Reclamation as a target here, a very land-heavy hand for Ichikawa.
Oh, Growth Spiral, something else that Elenbogen would have loved to have taken on turn 2. Peeled for Ichikawa. That's going to be huge here.
Andrew won't be happy about that. Does get to land this Roche Rider here, with Judith as a potentially very scary follow-up for next turn.
And Judith, because she is a lord, it feels like a lot of the power in that card is that she has her own form of pseudo-haste, right? Where if you have 3 bodies that are attacking, she only has 2 power on her face, but she does have 3 damage being added to the red zone the turn she enters the battlefield.
Yeah, sometimes that pseudo-haste is not haste at all against like a sweeper, for instance, where you follow up with Judith, no immediate impact, but if you get to preempt a sweeper with a Judith, you're attacking for more damage and then also dealing a ton of damage on the way out.
Right, so just having these sorts of cards in the games that you would normally be winning, or the games where you actually feel like you can get a foothold, is huge. That is the importance of these aggro decks. Being on the draw, being on the play, being able to get out onto the battlefield.
And a nice start here for Ichikawa, not interacting with what Elenbogen's doing yet, but that top deck Growth Spiral into Uro plus Petty Theft here on turn 3 for Ichikawa is going to allow him to save off the Judith beats on this turn.
And something that we see Ichikawa really emphasizing is trying to get back these Uros as quickly as possible. That's what won game 1, that it felt like Ichikawa had a ton of work to do, but Uro is just that powerful against these aggro decks.
But note here that Petty Theft can deal with the Judith for a turn, but it's not a permanent answer. So if Elenbogen tries to that Judith next turn, or God forbid if he draws a Winota, then that's really going to put Ichikawa in a world of hurt.
A lot is riding on the top of Ichikawa's library at this point, because even if this borrower undoes one of the creatures on the battlefield, that's only temporary. And look at this Petty Theft on Kitesail Freebooter instead of Judith. That's Ichikawa realizing just how valuable a copy of Wilderness Reclamation can be when paired with this Ketria Triome in terms of supercharging these Uros.
And that means now that any expansion explosion, any Shard Typhoon is a terrifying draw for Ichikawa.
And there's even a point where if Ichikawa can just continue emptying his hand, this freebooter isn't going to get to take a card after this, and it's just a 2-mana 1/2 flyer.
But look at this as well. Bone Crusher Giant up the top for Ichikawa, and that can deal with either the Judith, or the Woe Strider, or even the freebooter on the way back down, and then the 4/3 can be the biggest thing on the board.
You see Ichikawa thinking about how to actually play these lands out, how best to make use of his mana.
A lot of options here on this turn. We even have an Uro we can cycle as well. Trying to build that graveyard for the other Uro.
Deciding that paying a couple life for the shock land, which translates to an extra mana on the back of this Raggrantome being cycled, is worth it.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice. You have to think about just how likely it is that mana can be used, because against an aggressive decks, those 2 points of damage can make all the difference. And if Ichikawa loses this game on the tightest of margins, we might be looking back at that decision. Just cycles a Triumph into another Triumph, so now that choice is going to work out well for him. He can stomp and then also cycle the other Triumph at the end of turn.
And that should be enough to bring back one of these Uros.
And here's a freebooter again, but a little bit too late. And no appealing targets for her.
Just the Stormcrow version of Kitesail freebooter.
And there's Stomp on Woe Strider.
Oh, this is interesting.
Yeah. No concern.
Maybe Ichikawa trying to get Elenbogen to sacrifice something else to this Woe Strider on the way out.
Yeah, that is the only sack outlet. So if you target something else, Elenbogen sacrifices it in response. You don't get the 4/3 half of Bonecrusher Giant because the spell fizzles. And then now you kind of force the issue where Elenbogen really wants to be able to scry into some more action. Can't do that with the Woe Strider off the board. Like, that card's our freebooter here. Elenbogen can afford to sacrifice it because it hasn't taken a card. So removing the Woe Strider now deprives him of that option too.
And now there's a lot of work that Elenbogen's cards have to do if they're going to stand up to an Uro.
Uro, as so often, the biggest thing on the battlefield. Much bigger than Lazartet Reaver and the army it's amassing.
Yeah, really, I'll say it, an unimpressive army. Ooh, another Bone Crusher Giant off the top for Ichikawa. This is huge.
Once again, we can remove Elenbogen's best threat and then trade with another one. Not even trade, just be bigger.
Ichikawa's a blue source short of escaping this Uro. Because there are 2 blue sources on the battlefield, but Ichikawa would need to also cast the Uro from hand to make that happen.
So we just have to cycle this first Uro, maybe hope to hit a blue source.
Ooh, Deafening Clarion off the top!
That isn't a blue source, but he'll take it. Ichikawa's perfectly happy with that one.
Sometimes you just can't be picky.
This is the opposite of whatever a monkey's paw situation is. And now we get some Judith triggers. Ichikawa still at a comfortable 13 life, or 12, excuse me.
Land off the top for Elenbogen.
And he's even short of escaping that Woe Strider.
1 card short.
And there's Brazenborrower as a 3/1. Easy to forget about it, but that one gets to start attacking now and applying a clock. And now Ichikawa can kind of be the aggro deck, where 2 Bowcrusher Giants, we have a Brazen Borrower, is going to be escaping before too long.
And this is one of the strengths we saw with the Jeskai Fires of Invention deck when that card was still legal, where this Brazen Borrower Bone Crusher Giant package turns the corner so quickly.
Gotta try, not going to get Elenbogen out of this very sticky situation. And Mystical Dispute tags Gigant of the Wellspring. To add insult to injury here.
Ooh.
And it looks like Yuki Ichikawa going to start this season off in style, defending his title, moving up to 2-0 in our first championship qualifier. We know he's going to be in that season 2, championship regardless. He's booked a seat there by winning the first one.